it's great to be able to see some faces, even though we're not in person. I know that there's more of that coming back online, and it's exciting. It's also a bit scary. You know, we don't know what we don't know, and you know, the thing that we're trying to concentrate on today is just talking about, you know, how businesses can move forward, how you can deal with a remote workforce that maybe you hadn't anticipated just a couple of months ago. Not every business is going to be able to work remotely, but for those that can, we hope that we can provide some information that help out. So just quickly, I'm Sean Pendleton. My wife, Yu Chen, is also on the call. We're the owners of TeamLogic IT of Fort Worth Alliance. And as Alicia mentioned, you know, we've recently opened. We opened, you know, last year in October, and we've been building the business since then. Obviously, we weren't expecting the challenge we're facing right now, but we feel like, you know, we can really be a resource for businesses in the area. And, you know, we'd like to be able to, you know, provide some tips here today. One of the things that we plan to do, and I'm happy to share this presentation with anyone that wants it, but we do have some great tools that are available for businesses. We'll share that in a slide later in the deck. These are, for the most part, free currently, or they have a trial period which you can use to test them out and see how they work for your business, and hopefully that's some things that can help. Just quickly, background for myself. You know, I'm kind of a tech nerd. I've been, you know, coding since I was 11 years old. I've got a master's in computer science. I worked in the broadcast industry creating television automation. So we were responsible for generating what controls everything in master control, and did that for about 20 years, managing a team. And in 2009, that team went remote. So we've gone through this, or I've gone through this in the past. I was managing a team that was, you know, constituted of people from all over the planet. We had teams in China, in the Ukraine, in Spain, in the UK, and all over the US. You know, so we left our offices in Irving in 2009, and I've basically worked from home ever since. You know, I did get out of the corporate world to open TeamLogic with Yu Chen. We did that about a year ago, and or we made the decision to do it. You know, and Yu Chen is got a great technical background as well, where I'm mostly software, she's mostly hardware. You know, so she's just come off her last stint was about, I believe, about 12 years with Sky in the UK, and you know, she managed a team of maybe 200 engineers. They would do things like build data centers and edit suites and satellite uplink centers. They managed 24/7 support. You know, everything glass to glass is what they would call it, from camera to the final viewer screen. So, you know, we've got a big technical background. We've done a lot of this remotely, and really understand some of the problems that people can face, you know, and the challenges there. But, you know, everything has started to change, you know, and so what we want to talk about today is not just how to survive working remotely, but hopefully how we can help you guys work well. And with that, I'll try to move on, and hopefully we'll be technically proficient. So really, today's focus is going to be about the remote workforce. We'll talk about security, productivity, and management. And I would like it, you know, since we are a fairly small group, if anyone has questions, feel free to interrupt or use the chat window, and maybe I can actually see those things and respond. Typically, a conversation is a lot more engaging than some guy going through his information, but I can do both. So feel welcome to reach out if there's anything that comes up as we go through this. So the place that I wanted to start is with security. So everyone is aware of things out there, and everyone was in a rush initially. How do we work from home? Let's just do it. You know, I've talked to people that are taking their computers from their desk at work, bringing it home, plugging it in, and you know, it kind of works. The problem with that is that it's not secure, and depending on your industry, it may actually be in violation of some of the policies and you know, regulations that govern us. So the thing that we'll look at is if there is a way to do this well, productively, and securely as we go forward. So here's why cybersecurity matters, as if it's a dark art. It's really about money. Um, you know, if your information is compromised, if your systems are taken down, if your internet access is blocked, it costs money. It costs money in productivity. It costs money in repair, damage to your brand. Um, you know, and the numbers that we see here, those are for our, you know, it's across the board. So you're talking about average incidents well into the millions of dollars. You know, if we talk about small businesses, which is a large part of our business, you know, we've seen the typical cost associated with a cybersecurity event increasing. As an example, the average cost to remediate a ransomware attack is now in about $84,000. That's up almost double over last year. And these are things that you know, small businesses a lot of times feel that they're too small to worry about. Nobody's going to look at me. I'm just a small little guy. The truth is, if your security is weak, you're low-hanging fruit, and you know, it may be much easier to take that information and use it in a criminal activity without prosecution than it would be to go after, you know, the big corporations. So everyone needs to be aware. I think that's probably one of the primary points. Phishing emails, these things are huge, and they'll set up a link. This is an example of something you can buy. It was in a Russian language cybercrime forum. Basically, it costs you about $200 to be able to set up a phishing campaign where you can go out and target individuals, send them a link. It looks like this. They click on the map, they find statistics, they're able to dive in, and then at some point, it's going to ask for information. You know, put in your information. We'll be glad to send you something that might look like this. You know, basically information about how to get your stimulus checks, you know, where you can go find vaccinations, all of these things. And they're going to ask you to put in your personal information. And once they do, once they get it, that's just the beginning. It's the beginning of potentially a very serious breach of personal information on your part. If they can use that subsequently to get into business networks, it puts the whole group at risk. It's really something that in the first place people need to be aware of, but in the second place it's a huge business risk, particularly as we move to a more remote workforce. The risks become larger because it becomes more difficult to manage all of the different I guess threat vectors, if you want to think of it from a technical perspective. So there are some things that we can offer. These are just tips to help, you know, but it's important to think about. You want to have a secure end-to-end connection. If you're working out of your office, typically you're behind a firewall, you're running endpoint management security, you know, antivirus, anti-malware, things like that help keep your system safe. You know, You might be working from home. You might be sharing that network with the rest of your family, kids doing their schoolwork, maybe a spouse. And if they happen to go somewhere they shouldn't, that could lead to remote access to your system. It could lead to people, capturing the communications coming from your IP address. So all of these things can be addressed. So we would typically have some recommendations. Those will be coming up. The other part of it is if you are working from home, you're just maybe you're on the phone. You want to walk down, grab a coffee. You're going through the kitchen. Everyone else is sitting around. Maybe you're discussing something that has to do with an employee. You're discussing something that has to do with a client. All those things need to be kept secure. So it's a matter of situational awareness, really. If you do have, personally identifiable information, or if you work under some compliance rules, like our healthcare providers who are under HIPAA, you have to be very careful about where you're communicating that information from and to, and how securely that communication line is. So, working from home raises a whole different set of concerns. Um, and it could be as simple as printing out some forms. You may print them out, you're printing them out to a work printer. You need to be sure that those things are secure and that people are not seeing them that shouldn't. So here's a few tips to deal with those issues. Shred business or sensitive documents after their use. You don't want to be, in a position where people are dumpster diving at your home to acquire information that should be confidential. Again, in a business, it might be the conversation around the kitchen or the break area, around the water cooler. But at home, it could just as easily be you mentioning something that your spouse may not have understood was confidential. There's no reason to put them in a situation where they could expose things. Phishing rules still apply. Don't click on links in your email from untrusted sources. At least be sure that whenever you're hovering over a link in an email, that it makes sense. If you do have questions, don't click the link. And then other things that you can do, and it's just good practice anyway, but set your machine up to automatically lock if you walk away. It can be on a timer. There are certain things now that will allow your phone and its location data to automatically log you out from your machine if you are beyond a certain distance. So these are important takeaways. We talked a bit about endpoint security. I'm not going to go too deep into this. This is just a best practices slide. Really, it's antivirus, anti-malware, multi-factor authentication. This is really, that is worth talking about a bit. It's key. If somebody does acquire your credentials for a remote system, whether it's in the cloud, whether it's a login to your email, a login to work, that VPN, enable multi-factor everywhere you can. It really lessens the chances of somebody exploiting your credentials in a way that they shouldn't. Operating systems, we want to be on the latest and greatest, but it's also for security concerns. A lot of businesses look at well, it's been working for the last 3 years. It still works. It does still work. The issue isn't that it works. The issue that it works safely. And those things have been around long enough that there's a list of exploits and vulnerabilities which bad actors can take advantage of. One of the last things, in our business, we work remotely as much as possible. We want to be able to provide quick service. We want to be able to get into a system, remediate issues before they become serious problems. But we also understand that should something happen, we need to keep your data out of somebody else's hands. So whether that's a login to your banking system, your accounting software, tax software, things like that, which is critical for a business. Should something happen, we would be able to remotely wipe this thing, encrypt the drives to the point where the data is unusable or it's just gone. And these are all things that we can help with. So people talk a lot about VPN, virtual private network. There's really a couple of different kinds of this. There's a personal VPN, something that you might want to use from an untrusted network. Say you're at the coffee shop, and more of us will be going back to coffee shops shortly. It's something we did a lot of before COVID-19 really forced everyone to rethink that. But it's a place like that, or a restaurant, a local business, sit down, log into the guest Wi-Fi and do some work. Well, that's great, but that information is not encrypted. You're not safe. It's basically exposing whatever information you're sharing through your system with everyone in the building and whoever they know. So the idea would be a personal VPN would allow you to have a secure connection. It would encrypt your traffic across an untrusted network. Now, a business VPN, on the other hand, is going to allow authorized access to people that should have it to particular resources within the business. This allows you to work on things remotely, So like I mentioned before, whenever we were working remotely, we would share our code that we're developing. We would share test plans and other documentation for our software. Every business has its own set of information that people collaborate with. And a VPN for a business is a great way to allow secure access to those systems to people working remotely, offsite. It's important to note having a VPN is not the only source for security. If you rely on the VPN as your exclusive secure source, probably is an issue. And then the other piece of this would be, if people are working from home, are they using business resources? Are they using a laptop or a computer from your work? Are they working off of their home computers, off of their mobile devices, maybe a tablet or a phone? And if so, how do you protect those devices and the information that's on there as well? So I'm not going to go through all of these. I will touch on them. So here's some things that are essential for business, particularly working from home. If you're on the business network, you could be consuming a lot of resources that are unwarranted. So things like DNS filtering, for example, could limit what's going on with your social media interactions if they're not a part of your daily 9 to 5, so to speak. Could also prevent consuming bandwidth for things like Netflix or other things that you shouldn't be looking at while you're at work. Encryption. So there's many different forms of encryption we can deal with, whether it's encrypted communications. Secure socket layer is a good example of that for websites that most people are familiar with. But there are ways of encrypting, your entire communication. Also, data, encryption of hard drives, which is something we really recommend. That way, if you have someone who physically acquires the device but can't, provide correct authentication, they can't access the data. Even if they pull the drives, it's meaningless. The next item, BCDR, business continuity and disaster recovery. This is in archiving. It's essentially a modern version of what we know as backup. This is a way to keep systems online. Typically, it involves some cloud storage, but um, it allows us to recover systems quickly. It also looks out for things like ransomware, you know, some process going through and encrypting data when it shouldn't. We can mark those things in time, understand when they occur, and back people out of those to a safe place and recover them quickly. Um, Also, we can do you know, recurring cybersecurity assessments where we come in, say, quarterly, and do a deep dive into your security, make recommendations, policy adjustments, and those are the kinds of things that can keep businesses safe. And this can go as far as, you know, working with our SOC or you know, active monitoring of systems. Um, another great capability that we offer and is really important is employee awareness. So everyone in a company takes some responsibility for the security of the system, and just being aware of the threats as they come in, and we offer training, we offer testing materials so that you know, you can ensure your workforce has been educated to understand the risks and understand some of the methodologies that the bad actors use. Dark web monitoring, you know, the dark web, people talk about it, not many people actually know what it is. You know, essentially it's an area of the internet that's not making itself available to search engines, so it's somewhat hidden. You have to use particular tools to get there, but it can be just a place for sharing information. Unfortunately, it's also a place for sharing illicit information or illegal information. And a lot of times you'll see things pop up that are essentially like eBay or Amazon, just for hackers and full of uh, things like people's personal information. Maybe you buy a few hundred records and see what you can do as far as impersonating people or using those credentials to get into secure systems and acquire that information, deliver ransomware. You know, it's a money-making opportunity for the people with that mindset. So what we can do is monitor the dark web for credentials associated with your business, give you alerts and recommended practices to keep yourself safe. You know, and we're able to come up with policies for cybersecurity. We talked about multi-factor authentication, but really that's whenever, you know, you have a second source. Typically, it might be on your phone through a an application or even a you know, a dongle which generates secure codes. So whenever you log in to your email, your VPN, any of your cloud resources, you're going to be challenged to provide this information as well, and it changes in real time. It's very difficult to break. It's not invincible by any means, but it's something that sure can help. So those are some of the concerns related to security, but the next part of it really has to do with productivity, you know, and being able to stay connected. You know, I think it's one of the key worries, you know, for businesses that are asking people to work from home where they haven't before. They haven't really thought about what that means. You know, part of it is how do we stay effective and how do we stay engaged? So, you know, we recommend kind of a self-assessment for your workforce, you know, to understand your readiness to work from home and to work well. You know, it's one thing to be able to work, it's another thing to be able to stay productive. And, you know, I think what we're seeing is that people that go in with a plan, that are sure that they have the equipment and the services that are needed to keep the individual roles and their requirements functional, they do pretty well. And I think going forward, we probably see more people working from home regularly, whether it's all the time or whether it's a few days a week or just whenever, there's a concern. If somebody at home has a cough, I don't feel comfortable going in to work and potentially exposing, my coworkers to something or our clients to something. So I'm going to work from home. But you need to be sure that you can do this effectively. So I think I mentioned this briefly, but we kind of put together a checklist. You want to be sure that you've got all the required hardware. Maybe that means buying a laptop for people to use at home. It could mean looking at what other devices they have at home that may be usable and that we can help you guys secure in a way that keeps your business information safe and confidential, but also takes advantage of what's out there. As far as connectivity goes, home internet may not be quite the same as far as expectations that we have as a business. So our suggestions are typically going to be you've got a 50 megabit connection down with at least 5 megabits up. One of the problems people run into here sometimes, though, is that their connection may be unreliable. And we have systems available that we can actually drop ship to a person's home without ever showing up. Configure in the cloud, turn it on, provide them with a secure segmented piece of their network with a backup or failover mechanism to ensure that even if their home network goes down, they stay up, secure, and we can even segregate their communication off from the rest of their household. Do need to be able to understand how VPN works and whether you've got all the tools and meeting software that you need. Things like Teams are really great for this. And in many cases, businesses may currently use a voice over IP phone system, so they could just take their phone from the office and plug it in. It's not very pretty, but I've actually done that. I've got my office phone. I just brought it back to the house. I've plugged it into a secure router that segregates everything, all the other network traffic from our home off. And so people call me, I call out. It's just the same as if I was sitting in the office. Those are things we can help with as well. And really, does your organization have a remote work policy? I think you're trying to set guidelines and expectations. One of the things that I found managing remote teams is that I can be more flexible. If people have kids and they've got to go pick them up from school, or they have an activity, or they need to go to the dentist, whatever the case is, what I've found is that you'll get a greater level of engagement working with remote people whenever you're dealing with people that are able to adapt, kind of on the fly, deal with life as it comes up, but then they may log back in and work 3 or 4 more hours, later in the day, just because they know they've got, things to get done. And lastly, the bring your own device. We've talked about that. If there is a bring your own device policy, what does that look like? Does that potentially bring risk into your business, and how to mitigate that? Something that we could help with. So we talked a bit about that management piece, in the previous slide. There's a few we can go through here. And this really has to do with setting up policies and standards, for what's allowed in the business network and what's not, as far as hardware, software, the acceptable use of social media. Also, we've talked a bit about some of the remote workforce solutions, whether it's talking about any of the tools listed here. We haven't really talked a lot about file sharing, but if you are collaborating with the team, being able to share files securely is important, whether that's done in the cloud or through VPN. Any of those things are certainly available. It's amazing to me if this event we're going through now had occurred, say, in 1995 as opposed to today. The impact, I think, would have been staggeringly worse, just because we didn't have the tools we have today. In many cases, it shifts how people work, but for the businesses that can do it, it really provides new avenues. And even for businesses like restaurants that have really had to adapt, doing curbside and delivery and things like that, the ability to get information out about how they're doing that has drastically changed. In those days, it would have been wait until the next edition of the phone book or the newspaper comes out and hope that people have a look. Now it's social media and your website. So people can really get the word out about what they're doing in different ways. Another piece of this is team engagement. I think it's really pretty simple. It's create a cadence for the group, understand how you can help the team and what they need to be successful. For example, this comes out of the agile world that I've worked in for years. It's a development methodology, but team huddles, whether that's a daily or weekly thing, we tend to do it in our business daily. It's a combination of what did you do yesterday, what are you doing today, and what's blocking you. And the thing that this sets is just a pace. It lets everyone know you're active, what you're doing. It sets accountability, and that I'm telling you I'm going to be working on this today, and tomorrow I don't want to tell you I didn't get it done. So it builds in a set of expectations, not just for management, but for achieving your goals in an organized way. Another thing that we do is try to establish priorities for objectives and share those. And so, whenever one task is done, just because you didn't plan to work on something else today, but maybe you got what you were planning to do done early, the objectives, and those are things you can set with probably a weekly meeting to help understand what the business goals are and make sure that everyone is on that same page. As we start to close down, everyone here apparently is familiar with some of the conferencing collaboration tools. These can be great ways to conduct business, but it's also a great way to actually see faces. It's one thing to talk to somebody on the phone, but sometimes, particularly for someone like me, if you don't see my facial expression, it's going to sound like I'm just completely robotic. When I'm not completely robotic, only about 98%. It's important, though, to try to keep those engagements. And there's some ideas for things that you can do. Schedule one-to-one time with people. Find out how they're doing. Those are the things that you would do. And we talked about it earlier. You might do it around the water cooler, talking about what movies you've watched, or sports. At the time there was sports, although hopefully that's coming back too. And there's some ideas for things that you can do. We've done a after hours kind of happy hour with some of our group, and that's interesting. It's not as much fun perhaps as being in person, but people adapt, and I think it's a great thing to use the tools that are available for more than just trying to get task A, B, and C completed. So we had mentioned earlier that there are some free resources. I'd like to be able to share, all of these with anyone who's interested. To that end, if you want to leave your email address in the chat or contact me, I think, I'll be glad to email you copies that you can use. But there are links, and these are actually safe in the slide here that lead you to some tools that may be of use. They're not all free. Some of them have trials, so you can determine whether or not they're useful. If you have questions, feel free to reach out. And with that, we are open to questions if there are any. And if there's something that comes up offline, feel free to reach out to us at any time. You can reach us at the number on this slide. You can reach me. My email is here, spendleton@teamlogicit.com. And we certainly welcome any questions or opportunities to help out.
All right, I was going to unmute you, Chen, for a second and see if she had anything she'd like to add. Sean?
Great.
No, I don't have anything to add other than you guys might have seen our cat has woken up and just did the rounds on the table.
Okay, well, I don't see any questions in the chat, but there's a lot of detail. So if anyone has, we're going to send this presentation out too, and you can go back and look at some of the links, and we'll email you guys the links for those free resources. So what is more secure, Teams or Zoom?
Teams.
Teams?
Definitely. So Zoom is trying to address some of the concerns that they've had. I think as this started up, there was a new phrase coined, the people coming in and Zoom bombing meetings. And that was simply due to the fact that there was very little to no security. I'm not exactly sure why somebody would do that, but apparently chaos is a motivation for some. Teams typically is a bit more locked down. You're controlling the audience more. I think that overall, Zoom is trying to take a lot of the issues that have surfaced, some of which had been around for quite a long time, but weren't a huge issue because there wasn't a lot of attention focused there. Yuch, did you have anything else to add there?
No, nothing for me.
Okay, well, we just want to thank you at the Chamber for giving us such a valuable information, and we appreciate everyone coming. And we have our last coffee in the kitchen tomorrow at 9 a.m. So join us. And again, this webinar series was provided by Legend Bank. I think I forgot to mention that at the beginning. So we appreciate their contribution, and we appreciate you guys at TeamLogic. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Marianne, did you have anything else to say?
No, I don't have anything. Just thank you to Sean and you, Chen, and we appreciate you sharing great information, and hopefully we'll see a lot of you tomorrow morning.
Will do.
Thank you for the information.
Oh, of course, anytime.